Axons Unleashed.
G'day everyone, my name's Robbie. I'm coming to you live and uninterrupted from downtown Gold Coast here. I'm joined with one of my really good mates actually. You guys have heard me talk about it before. I love being a property coach, a life coach, a careers advisor. Sometimes I'm a padre, sometimes I'm a family planner, I'm a marriage counsellor. Not that I'm very good at that, but I love the opportunity of like now providing services to the defence community, and I take great pride in making sure that when I do get a really deep sort of connection with someone, they're not just another client of mine, they're one of my really good mates. And yeah, brings me great joy to bring on Josh Fink now. Brother, how are you?
I'm excellent, RT. How are you?
Good, mate. Good. I remember having a call with you, a Zoom call from a client perspective, and we spoke about 10 minutes of Axon property stuff. So you gave me a bit of an update, and then we just jawed off for the last 40 minutes just, hey, what are you doing? And blah, 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 blah. And went, fuck, you should come and join our podcast. Like, I think you'd really, really have some great stories to tell. And I literally said it to Tamara this morning as I was toweling off after my shower, probably a bit too much information there. I said, I'm speaking to Josh Fink today on a podcast. She's like, oh, great. How's he going? I mean, you know what, babe? He's actually matured wonderfully. He speaks really well. He's had lots of different experiences. He's been able to successfully transition out of the military from being an army officer. And certainly Josh will tell people the story about how you first, we stumbled across each other. And so the bottom line is, mate, I'm really proud of where you've got to and what you're doing. And I know you've got lots of things to pass on. So yeah, mate, let's get into it.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's great because a lot of it's attributable to you. And when we talked last time, there's still things now that I do or I experience. So I think, bloody Robbie, just like as much as, and I told you this last time, when my alarm goes off in the morning and I go to hit snooze, your voice rings because that was the advice at Duntroon was like, when your alarm goes off, get up straight away. So I feel guilty for not getting up as soon as my alarm goes off. That's if I even set one. Because I
feel guilty that I'm in your mind most days.
It's for good reasons. So, it's not a bad thing. But no, it's great. And on the topic of Tam, last time we spoke, we went way over time. And, you're like, hey, I told Tam I'd only be an hour. I'm like, cool, blame me. It's my fault. So,
it's never your fault, mate. I choose to... I'm here. I can click start, go, whatever else I want to do. So, yeah. Mate, tell us. Let's just sort of get there because you and I know each other very well. Most other people listening, unless they're inside our sort of broad circle, will be coming across you for the first time. Mm-hmm. Where'd you grow up? Why'd you join the military? All that sort of stuff.
Okay, so I grew up in Melbourne. Mum, dad, and 3 younger sisters. Dad was in the federal police, and mum was mum because she had 4 kids to look after. I get asked this all the time from my background, like, why did you join the military? So it's a pretty simple answer. Both my grandfathers had served in World War II.
Awesome.
So my paternal grandfather was born in Poland, fled to Australia in the 1930s, joined the Australian Army and wanted to go back to Europe to fight the Nazis.
Of course.
Because they were trashing his homeland, and that's kind of linking to relevant current affairs. Ended up serving in Kokoda. He passed away before I was born, but that also meant that Dad joined the Army as a reservist to do FARP, so forward arming refueling of helicopters, and had a heap of stories about that. So that was my father's side of the family. Mum's side, my grandfather and his brother served in the Polish Army under the Russians in World War II, and I grew up with them. And they were chalk and cheese. My grandfather was the logistics officer, very serious, no sense of humor, where his brother was an infantry officer, had seen some stuff, and he was like loving his life, joyful, made everyone laugh. And just the folders and medals that I got to see was, for this battle, for liberating this village, 3 silver commendations from Stalin. Like, growing up with that belt fed into me just meant that I naturally wanted to go down the military path.
It almost would have been a travesty if you didn't, mate.
And this is it. So every Anzac Day, I and for the last few years, I've been a bit disconnected due to transition and veteran community and so on.
Let's talk about that.
I lay out the medals. So I have 3 generations of Australian medals. So my grandfather's from World War II, my dad's police and CHOP medals, and then mine from Afghanistan, and 3 generations of slouch hats. So I've got my grandfather's slouch hat from World War II.
Wow, I bet that is a very treasured item that you have there.
Yeah, locked away in one of the many bits of kit in my garage that I need to sort through and reduce, but it's there.
Don't throw that away, buddy, please.
Or no, never. If anything, I'll be like, hey, War Memorial, do you want another one of these? Like, but
Amazing.
We'll see how we go.
So there's many ways of joining the military. It's like it was always going to be Army for you, I take it?
No. So Here's a little embarrassing story where I got tricked, I'll say, by DFR, and that's a little on me. So initially I wanted to join straight out of high school, and I went through the process, like, we can't talk to you till 15 and 9 months, blah, blah, blah. And then I had a few issues with recruiting when it was solely run by manpower, medical, whatever. Then at 22, I had a WWII, or 21, a WWII ring me and say, hey, we've got uniforms back in recruiting now. I found your file. You do this one test. I'll have you in within 3 months. I'm like, cool, when and where? Did it, passed, no problem. And then I get to recruiting, and I had to do the aptitude testing and stuff, and I'm sitting in the waiting room in my suit, young, impressionable, and they send out I feel bad saying this attractive young lady who sits next to me and says, you did really well, you can do whatever you want. I think you'd be great as an infantry officer at Duntroon. I'm like, okay. But the original plan was a fighter pilot. So in high school, I did, physics, advanced math, English, IT, all these subjects to gear myself to be a fighter pilot. And they'd said, yeah, you've got the aptitude for it, but, how about Army? And I was like, okay, sure.
And then, of course, it wasn't just Army, it was Duntroon Army. Or did that come later?
So the way we met, which people won't know, is that I went through Bridges Company first because the Officer Selection Board had some concerns. And I said, I'll do whatever it takes to get in, send me wherever you need to do, whatever I can to prove myself. And they're like, well, have we got a path for you? How about Bridges Company? I'm like, cool, let's do it. And I remember being at Kapuka as on the reserve recruit course, and you appeared. And there's this young, fit, strong-looking, confident captain with a green beret, pulls a bunch of us behind the weapon sheds while at the range to have a talk. And that was the moment I was like, I want to be like that guy. I want to be that level. I want that confidence. I want that experience. I want to push myself. And then we just kind of followed each other a little bit there with your instructor at Duntroon as well for leadership. And I'm sure you remember a lot of the conversations we had as well.
Indeed.
And so went through Duntroon.
Did you fucking hate me doing that Shaggy Ridge stuff?
No.
Oh, good.
No, that was probably one of my most enjoyable experiences at Duntroon because it was so demanding to do the food and sleep deprivation for a week and just be in body armor, carrying stores. And then, everyone does it. We're like, the next group don't have it as hard as we do. Like ours was harder, like whatever.
Yeah.
But I loved it. And then you were actually quite reasonable where I had, feet issues. And I got pulled out, gone to see the medic. You're like, Josh, what are you doing here? And I was like, I've got problems with my feet. Like, okay. And I could hear the DS in the tent going off. It's just fucking linging, whatever. And then the doctor comes out, has a look at me, and he's like, oh, this is pretty bad. Goes back in their tent. And I could hear him say, no, he's not making this up. This is bad. And they had to do some stuff. But that aside, no, I really enjoyed the leadership and the challenge.
It's funny. I introduced another one of our clients to another mutual friend of ours, and I'm like, I met him down at Duntroon. I was one of the instructors, and the reply was, "What?" And he still talks to you now? You and him and countless others, mate. I'm really, really glad that some of the youngest and the smartest and the most intelligent and motivated individuals that Australia's got to offer go and put themselves through the best leadership institution in the country from a military perspective.
And as a little segue to what we'll probably talk about soon, is it's such a shame that that's not so well recognised, at least in the public sector. I think it's a big problem. The private sector tends to value it a bit more. But when I, applied for jobs and, interviewed and say, I've got extensive management and leadership experience, they would look puzzled and say, no, you don't. I'll go, well, at one point I was managing a squadron of 120 people. How's that not management and leadership experience? Or different context. So, I think Duntroon doesn't quite get the recognition it deserves. And even the promotion courses, like doing Major's course in 2015, the command and leadership module on that is fantastic.
Yeah, good stuff, mate. I'm really, really glad you got to sort of do that. Tell me about life after Duntroon. Where'd you go?
So I did 3 one-year postings as a subby. I went to 1 Armoured first, which was great when it was the tank regiment.
So that attractive lady was wrong. You didn't go to infantry. You ended up going to Armoured Corps.
No. So as anyone who's been through Duntroon will know, there's, a tiered system and we all have different experiences. Mine was checkered with all sorts of problems and I didn't perform. I don't think I was ready to be at Duntroon. To see the ex-servies that come through and they just go through that green field phase like it's, eating breakfast was, an eye-opening experience. To go and do things that we have done again would be totally different. But no, I didn't do as well as I would have liked. But I ended up going logistics and I was quite happy to be able to do that because of the broad challenge that is, RAME, so electrical mechanical engineers, and managing workshops for armoured regiments.
Yeah, gold. And you know what? That's some of my memories of you. That's why I said that tomorrow this morning. I'm like, he's really matured well. Like he's come a long way. Like you can't unchange. Like as the saying goes, you only get one chance in a first impression. And certainly that Bridges Company concept, it was the pilot course. You might have been on the second one. I can't remember now. But certainly it was something that was created at headquarters RMC-A to effectively have people that were most likely going to succeed at Duntroon, but yet weren't quite ready. So let's do a little mini course in the first place, and then you go up the hill from there, as the saying goes. So you just happen to be caught in that sort of bunch there. So, mate, we all look back, and I was a young, dumb, and the rest of it story when I first joined as well. And some would say I still haven't changed, and that's probably not too far from the truth as well. But everyone sort of starts, and we all therefore reflect. I'm like, oh, God, I was such an idiot back then. When you're 18, 19, 20, 21, fucking 31, I can look back and think some of the things I did when I was 41 are still quite immature. But we're all on a little pathway of evolution, mate, within this, crazy little thing called life that we're leading.
And that's the thing. As you become more mature, you become more self-aware and can identify things. Like my current job that I've just left after 2.5 months was a sales and BD role. And the self-reflection was, this isn't for me. I can't do this where I keep, pestering people to make sales and look to sell products. And it's not me. And that was the feedback to the GM. Like, hey, I appreciate the opportunity, but some internal reflection. I'm not loving this role. I'm not gelling with it. And if I'm not going to do my best. I need to go do something that speaks to me.
Yeah, it was only a few days ago in my life, but for all the other listeners, I don't know when you listened to it last time, but the podcast that I did with Joe Lucino and Dan Vincent from Soldier On speaks exactly that. At most people's peril shall you get out of the military and chase big dollars in a role that you don't actually love. And you'll do that for a short period of time or maybe even a long period of time, but at some stage, for those that have the right levels of self-awareness, you'll be drawn back to what actually lights your fire internally, as opposed to chasing external gratification and remuneration, etc. So, mate, I'm really glad that you tried that for a little bit. You scratched that itch, and now look, let's leave it to the back end about what you're doing now. But I'm really glad that you were able to also reflect upon. And before hearing that podcast, you're like, this is not for me. You might have been earning good dollars, but I call that selling your soul to the devil. You've got to actually enjoy what you're doing and feel like you're contributing to something larger to yourself, etc.
Yeah, so you're right. Let's bat through it chronologically. So I did that. I went to Kapuka as a platoon commander, loved it. Went to the School of Armour as a troop leader there, loved that. Got Met qualified. Got posted back to Melbourne at a CHOC unit as a 2IC. Eventually got a deployment to Afghanistan, which I loved.
Awesome.
One of my absolute highlights of my career, being a mentor to Afghan National Security Forces for 7 months. That was fantastic. Came back 2 years in Sydney at Headquarters Forces Command as an ops captain, which was odd because I posted into one role and they're like, no, the G3 wants you in the current ops, even though you're a loggy, because he wants a bit of diversity of thought. I'm like, okay.
Nothing wrong with that.
No, it worked quite well. And, to his credit, he had a plan and it worked.
So, I mean, to be fair, if I can jump in, what's the biggest issue that Russian tanks that have got right now? They've got logistics issues, haven't they? They can't sustain themselves.
Some would argue there's this lack of combined arms, no infantry to clear the urban terrain to make sure they don't get crumped by anti-armor weapons, but logistics is a big problem.
Yeah. Good on you, mate. It's a salient lesson for everyone out there. We all used to, us arms corps guys and girls, down at COAC, for instance, and be like, fucking loggies, I'm glad they're not here. And we come up with these amazing ground maneuver plans or whatever. And one of the instructors or something, or we may have a visiting lecturer comes in and they've got a logistics background and they're like, see that column of tanks over there? They just ran out of fuel. They're going to sit there now for 2 weeks until we get the rest of it up there. Like, oh, fuck, how do we back out of that? Like, you can't. You made dumb decisions without having some of your key advisors, comms and logistics specifically. Can't talk to people. You can't bloody sustain yourself. It ain't going to happen, gents.
Yeah, and that's it. And they have, loggy integration with COAC now for years, which I did, and it's fantastic. But when I was at Forces Command, this is where my career started to diverge a bit. So the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet had approached the base and said, hey, we're looking to host the Council of Australian Government, COAG, at your base amongst other locations. Can we come have a look? And the G3 dragged me along to meet them on base. And we're in the mess and we've done a tour with them. And they're like, yeah, this looks really good. I think we'd be happy to have it here. And the G3 starts talking, all right, so if you're going to do that, you're going to need a point of contact. And my spidey sense started tingling and I started to back out of the room. And sure enough, as I was about to leg it out the door, the G says, Josh, get back here. And bang, knifed in the front for, hey, you're the point of contact for PM&C. And for the next 6 weeks or so, I had to do coordination between AFP, government departments, New South Wales Police, base security, uniform, catering, all of that to host what was a very successful Council of Australian Government. Off the back of that, PM&C offered me secondment or reached out again and said, hey, would you want to come help us out at Parliament House?
You obviously impressed them then, mate, which is good.
Well, one thing I found is that senior public servants aren't used to being told no. And because the G3 had trusted me, we'd worked together for a year, I think it was. He said, you're representing the SADFO. So the Chief of Staff, who at the time was then Brigadier Field, he's like, you're speaking with his authority. So what you say goes. And I'm like, oh, God, that's a lot of responsibility. I better not, balls this up. And so a lot of the times, like, yeah, we want to do this. I'm like, no. Like, what do you mean no? I'm like, well, that's not right, because if you do this, it means that, and the second, third order effects. So they really sort of respected the ability to analyse and stand up to something and just say, no, I don't care that you're quite senior or you report to the Prime Minister. That's dumb.
That's just that's you exercising a bit of moral courage there, mate. That if you're there as the subject matter expert and you're the one that's got your own reputation on the line and you've been charged with the authority to execute that plan, then you've got to stand up for what you know is right. It's almost like if it was a safety issue, you'd be standing up for it. So if it's a capability or an operational functional issue, why not stand up for what's right also?
100%. And I think most people in that position would have done the same thing. Any general service officer largely would have acted in the same way, done the same thing. So, I think it was a result of the process and good instruction at training establishments to make sure I did that.
No, I mean, even here in Axon, even though we do have amazing culture, sure, we have a mixture, a collaboration of civvies and veterans. Clearly, for those people that know me, we still run it like a sort of military style business anyway, but I wish there was more courage shown at the lower levels, if I can use that term, or the people that have got, lower down tasks. Lower down's not the right term. People that are outside of the leadership group. I wish they would speak up more about what could be done better here, because I'm fucking eyes and ears wide open. I've openly said I'm perfectly imperfect, and those that know me well will be like, yes, that's true. And I'm always open, to other ideas. The words I use is, I'm not the keeper of all good ideas. I seek people's ideas. I seek feedback. I've got extremely thick skin and still reasonably large shoulders. I can take whatever feedback you have coming my way. I wish there was more, though. I wish there was more bottom-up refinement. So, mate, good on you for taking charge on that in your own little sphere there anyway.
Oh, thanks for that. And it seemed to work really well. So after that, I posted to Army Logistic Training Centre in Wodonga, and that's where, PM&C really cemented to get me a secondment in. And it took a while, because trying to do something in Army that's different is usually shunned. So it was a real battle to try and get them and us to agree and get it through DOCM. And the career manager and the DOCM had to go in and advocate to DGCMA to let me do it, because I wanted to open up a new pathway and to look at, working in other government departments and how Army and Defence can learn from that. So trying to be a little bit innovative. And then I did. I got a several months secondment into Prime Minister and Cabinet, and credit to my CEO for releasing me for that, because as most people in defence know, people don't like to be released. And that was phenomenal. So when you talked with Joe and Dan, and we talked about before about ethical and things that speak to you, that was working on public policy at the highest level to actually impact people's lives. Yeah. And I really identified with that.
Yeah, mate, it's gold. That would have really opened your life in, like, just think about it. You're working in the Prime Minister's office and you're like, effectively a military liaison officer. You don't get access to that sort of stuff. Like, that is like the 0.1% of people would even know how and what that thinks and feels like.
Yeah, I wasn't, and it's important to differentiate. I wasn't in the Prime Minister's office. I did visit them, but in the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet, so on the top floor, sitting near the executive, so the secretary and deputy secretaries working on, and essentially the project office was an internal consulting firm, which is when they had stuff they didn't know what to do with, give it to the project office. And, one of the people I worked so closely with is a professor at Oxford, and she was then, and I think still is, on their website. And the interaction between someone at the highest level academia and me, who at that time hadn't had tertiary education, was brilliant. And that really just sort of lit a fire.
Yeah, gold. What happened then, mate? And how did you sort of think? When were your first thoughts about, I'm going to maybe think about transitioning from the military? Because how many years had you got under your belt at this stage?
Be about 10.
Okay. So there's a few indoor cricket seasons that have been and gone. And you've got 10 years of military experience under your belt, flying along, kicking ass there. What can you remember what the point was where you're like, maybe I might, this is not forever, and I'm going to now actively start looking and pursuing and thinking about transition? Because remember, ladies and gents, it's not if you get out, it's when you get out.
Yeah. It was that. It was that experience at Prime Minister and Cabinet, going back to ALTC in Bandiana and just being miserable. I was utterly miserable. I just didn't want to do it anymore. I wanted to get out, and I wanted to continue to serve, like we've talked about it, or you've talked about on other podcasts, in a different way. And the term public servant clicked for me in that most of them are working towards better outcomes for the general populace. They're working on policy, on strategies, on benefits and things for the broader public. And I got to do that at the highest level in the Indigenous Affairs portfolio. And it just lit a fire in me to go and do more of that. So I contacted Soldier On, funnily enough, and somehow I got connected into, hey, there's this role in Vic government in the veterans branch working on the public sector veteran employment program, which was a Premier Dan Andrews commitment to employ more veterans in the public sector.
Gold.
Yeah. So I'd interviewed for that. They go back to me and said, look, we've got someone else who's far more suited because she's got extensive public sector experience, blah, blah, blah. But we were so impressed, we still want to offer you a short-term contract. I'm like, brilliant. We negotiated a bit, which you don't normally do in the public sector, and I took a significant pay cut to do it. But luckily, because I'd worked my butt off, I had extensive leave. So I took a mix of annual leave and long service leave at half pay to cover 7 months in the public service, getting, 1 foot in, 1 foot out, and getting paid by both.
That's gold though, mate, because it's a big bad world out here. As you heard Joe speak about, it's the real world, but for us to join the military and went through that indoctrination process, it's never going to be the real world. It's actually a foreign world, but it's the world that we're going to spend the most amount of time in, as you heard me speak about a couple of days ago.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was a kind of a rude transition, if I will, because still at that point, Defence still hadn't figured out how to effectively transition people. You did a 2-day transition seminar and boot, off you go. I will disagree with something that Joe said yesterday in that, we come from an ethical background where everyone in defence is operating ethically and da-da-da-da-da, and outside it's self-interested, which that part I agree with. My experience, like a lot of people would have had, is that when I asked to do something a little different or asked for a consideration from a delegate in accordance with PACMAN, the Pay and Conditions Manual, people just don't give a shit in defence. Like, there's an individual making decision like, well, why should they get that? My careers advisor at the time screwed me over horribly on my transition out, and I got shunned. I got promoted to major, go band 1 at PAC to then get reduced in rank because I was discharging post my effective promotion date. There are people out there that just want to sink the boot in because they don't like what you're doing. And that happens in defense. And I know a lot of people listening will have had similar stories, same theme. It happened to them. So I didn't have a great transition out of defense.
Mate, it's a very, very regular story I hear. As soon as the flag goes up and you start talking about the D word, you get voted off the military island very, very quickly. And it's so sad. Fucking sad. It's, you get all these generals that come along and are like, our most important resource is our people. Shut up, dickhead. It's fucking not, in truth. But of course it is. You need people to be able to go do stuff. But in the context of what we're talking about, as soon as someone's like, hey, I don't want to be part of this organization anymore. Thank you so much for making me into the person I am. Can you please now help me transition? No, mate. And then your story and dozens of other stories have I heard along the way where it's transition no wonder people fear going through the transition, because it's not as if there's fucking 1,000 success stories out there. But there's 1,000 really shit ones, and you're listening to one of them right now, ladies and gents.
Yeah, and I'll say this, that, General Angus Campbell, when he was Chief of Army, introduced, I think it was Project Suakin, where the whole of career, in and out of the military, wants people to be able to leave, come back, because he did it. He did what I thought was great. He left, I think as a colonel, went and worked in the public service for a couple of years, made, DepSec, I think it was, then came back in as a general. And he had the right idea on the policy. It's those beneath that have to actually enact and adhere to that intent that choose not to. That's where that goes wrong. But, so experienced that. And it was a problem on both sides. So one thing that stuck with me as well, which everyone listening probably knows, is that there's an actor called Adam Driver, who's famous for playing Kylo Ren in Star Wars. He was a US Marine, and he's done a couple of TED Talks and roundtables where he said, leaving the military, there's this fallacy that everything else outside is going to be easy. You've done food and sleep deprivation. You might have been in combat. So all the civilian problems pale in comparison. And it's a fallacy, because they're just different problems and you're not prepared for them.
Yeah, so but they're problems that you're now facing on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So that kind of stuck with me. And then I was in veterans branch of the Vic government working on veterans employment in the public sector. And I was so lucky to have some expert input, people like Harry Moffat, Mark Wales, Steve Cottrell, and others that would come and spend time with me at their, just for free, to help me understand how we could better do things.
3 exceptional individuals you list there, mate.
Oh my God. Just seeing them and seeing how they just excelled outside, and, Mark, for one, going from the SAS to go, I want to go to business school. I want to build a fashion brand, and just having the courage to go, I'm going to do that. Harry's doing amazing things.
Did you read Mark's book?
No, I've taken a step away from military stuff given what had happened. I'm actually trying to read a bunch of different stuff, and I was too much into the non-fiction that it's time to expand the brain a little bit. Yeah.
Down the track, buddy, do yourself a favour. It's an excellent book, and anyone else listening, jump on and grab that book, Survivor by Mark Wales. You will not be disappointed. There's a bunch of awesome stories in there that I had no idea about. I don't know him super closely, but we certainly shared, many bumped into each other many, many times, did a few things together. So, yeah, worth the read, put it that way, or jump on Audible or Booktopia, wherever it is you grab your stuff online. I understand that it was about that time that you you and I came across each other again. Tell us about that.
So I've been talking to Dan Irwin, so one of the many Dans that you have in your orbit, because we'd worked together when I was at Forces Command and he was at 6th Brigade headquarters, and we'd stayed mates. And it's like, oh, yeah, I'm out, I'm doing this. What are you doing? Oh, I'm working with RT. I was like, really? What are you doing? Tell me about it. And he laid out kind of your model and what you were doing. And I go, I know that is the optimal way to invest in property. I just can't do it on my own.
And we're talking like mid-2018 or so?
Early 2018, if not late 2017.
Right, tracking. So we were about a year old by then.
Yes. Yeah, it was still fresh, and Dan laid it out, and I said, that's brilliant. And he goes, do you want me to set up a coaching session with RT? And then from there, just, you laid out the plan as you do, or the coaches do now, and everything happened as you said it would happen when it would happen, which I was baffled. I'm like, that never happens.
I was going to say, for those not watching on YouTube, you're like, you're like frowning and scrolling, going, what was written on the box actually happened. I'm like, yeah.
Not once, but twice. So that's where, I introduced to your network and the wonderful Deb Roethlisberg, who
mortgage broker
does her magic and, traumatized me severely, but that's not her fault. That's the banks and the paperwork and stuff.
Yes.
Deb's a superstar, as most people in your orbit are.
Because you had two forms of income. You go back to, you had 1 foot in defence, still being paid on a bit of leave, sometimes half pay, and then you're sort of getting some of your pay coming in from that veteran employment thing you were speaking about as well. So, that's you were trying to buy two properties at the same time whilst transitioning and having a whole lot of stuff, and then trying to live your life and start to transition into being a civilian, all together. It was a pretty tumultuous time for you, I've got to say.
And then some. There was a couple other things going on as well, which is, when it got to the point of, as Dan in the podcast yesterday put it, that semi-trailer came along and just ran me over.
Yes.
A bunch of significant life events happening, including transitioning from defence, that just brought me unstuck. But I'd finished up at the veterans branch and then found a much better place to be after that.
Yeah, tell us about that. Is that when you joined Elbit, was it?
Yes. So
Great.
I
just explain who Elbit is and talk about who they are, and then how you come across that job, and then how you felt working in a great organisation like that, etc.
Yeah, so Elbit is a Israeli parent company. They're a global. So Elbit Systems of Australia is now run by Paul McLaughlin, a retired Major General who was Commander 1Div. A lot of people would know. He only took over sort of in the second half of my time there, but they were working on Land 200, Army's battle management system. And at the time, my contract is finishing up at the government, which was another story in its own. A few people had approached me and said, hey, we hear you're getting out. Would you be interested? And I got some advice around which way to go. And someone had said, anything with Forbo and Elbit, you want to be a part of. So I went and interviewed with Andrew Forbes, who was my boss for 4 years. And it was kind of like having a chat with a CO, but not in a bad way. And I just felt like, okay, I'm going to be in amongst, veterans working on technology that's going to benefit Army. And I said this in a video they did about why did I choose Elbit, because I felt like I could still meaningfully contribute to benefit those in uniform by working on this product for them.
So good.
Yeah, and it was great. It was an absolutely fantastic experience in that I got to be surrounded by veterans. Everyone was supportive. We had a really big chunk of important work to do, and I got to grow a lot of skills through analysing, requirements of contracts, turning that into engineering documents, working with software engineers, including to the point where they made me a product owner, which is a systems engineer role for 6 months. And I'm like, I'm not an engineer, right? Like, yeah, you'll figure it out.
What a great title, though. Systems engineer, that's bloody awesome.
But that was fantastic. And then, as it's widely publicised, there was issues with Land 200, a lot of which are untrue, and that'll all come out in the wash eventually. It just was a great place to be for 4 years.
What was the ratio, Josh, can you remember, of veterans working there?
At one point, it was, I think, around 50-ish.
50% or 50 veterans?
50 veterans. The company at its peak in Australia, I think, was around 300. It's shrunk a bit lately.
Sure. So
it's down to probably around 30-odd veterans. But ratio roughly 5-1.
And what was it like working with them? Was there still a little bit of a spirit of corps? Was there people still walking around with their rank on? Just, Army, Navy, Air Force? Just give myself and the listeners a bit of an insight into that, because this is where so many people want to be able to, they find it an easy way to go. I don't want to be in the military anymore. I'll go be a defence contractor and work in the defence sector, and then the reasons why you were there in the first place, but then they've also got to then understand what the dynamics are going to be in that workspace.
Yeah, and I think it's not cut and dry with every business and defence industry. but it's a lot better. So I found that no one was kind of hanging on to their rank. Everyone in that group was ex-Army, I think bar one. And it was just very supportive. Like, you stand around, you have your brew, you talk shit, and you tell your stories. But ultimately, we were all there to represent Army's interests, employed by Albert, but to say, okay, while we're developing this product for Army, this is what people in uniform actually want. And it was great. And, you may have different experiences at different defense companies, because some people do still sit there and think, well, I used to be the blah, 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 and no one cares, mate. When you're out, no one gives a shit. Yeah,
mate, it's totally fine. I'm actually really, really good to hear that, because, we hear lots of other people that talk about, in the mess, the colonels' wives are walking around with the colonel's sort of rank on, etc. So it would have been really good that at least it was a bit more of a chilled environment. What about the Army, Navy, Air Force thing? Was that sort of? Oh, sorry, you said it was predominantly Army anyway. So
yeah, no, because we were working on a product for Army. The need was for ex-Army personnel, and then if Albert bid in for JP 9111, which was a joint project, but they didn't win. If that had gotten up, they were actively looking to hire Air Force and Navy to grow that joint workforce. But in defence industry, everything is around work and projects. If you have the need, you hire to meet that need.
Yeah, good stuff, mate. What was your highlight of working at Albert then? And what was it like having an ex sort of Commander 1 Div come in and be there as a civvy, and you no doubt would have remembered him sort of being in, etc. Like what sort of dynamic? How did that change the dynamic when someone like him came in?
Yeah, so the best highlights probably in 2019. I did nearly 4 months in Canberra doing product demonstrations to senior defence leadership, everyone from CDF to CJOPS to Chief of Army to DCA to Commander 4Com, Commander 1 Div, their staff, colonels, politicians. That was awesome to stand there with a fully networked demo room and go, this is not a sales pitch. This is what you bought. This is what we are delivering. No need to buy anything. Staring at then the Commander 1 Div, Jake Elwood, and his staff and saying, sir, as the commander, when you're briefed, the software can do blah, 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 blah. Hey, 3, when you have your staff doing this brief, blah, 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 and they're just seeing them go, I can use that. That's great. So to be able to demonstrate the work I had done and how it would benefit them and see them connect with it was probably the highlight, of which there were many. The second part, how did it go? So Paul McLaughlin came in and took over and started to reshape the organisation a bit because it needed it. And he built it a bit more like a military organisation. So he got a chief of staff, changed a few appointments. And I think by their own admission, that didn't necessarily work. But honestly, I cannot fault Paul for his effort. From my perspective as a veteran, seeing him in that business context, he was doing everything he could to get it right. He was trying so hard, throwing resources at problems, trying to listen to the right people. And he was coming up against it hard because other people, in defence were actively trying to make it fail.
Good on him. Like, that's awesome to have someone get out at his rank and his experience level, and just to see what I took away from that is like he threw himself into the role for the betterment of that organisation, knowing full well that his capability and his experience was going to benefit those that are still wearing a uniform. So, mate, that would have been on face value probably inspiring for you and the rest of the crew to see that. He wasn't too senior to get his hands dirty, per se.
Correct. And, talking to him in the office, I was in Brisbane, he'd come grab a coffee. It's like, hey, Paul, how are you? Which felt weird initially as, he'd just come out as Commander 1 Div. And a little side story, when I was working in the veterans branch of big government, I was working with his dad, David McLaughlin, who was the state president of RSL Victoria for 15 years. So when I came across and Paul joined, I was like, hey, how's your dad? But, two exceptional gentlemen that had just wealth of experience for different reasons. But Paul really, people were surprised when I tell them how he was out of uniform. Nothing like some of the experiences people may have remembered in uniform. And I couldn't fault him. He was trying really hard and he recognised failings as well.
Yeah, mate, he just had to play a different character when he was in uniform. And now he probably felt like the the reins of responsibility and reporting to Chief of Army and everyone else at that higher level of, not on him anymore, and he's just sort of inside of a private company. It's a salient story, ladies and gents, for those of you that want to get out and join defence industry. There's probably going to be some ex-senior officers in the ranks there somewhere that you're going to have to sort of converse with. So, mate, it's really insightful as far as some of your experiences go.
Yeah, so, that was great. And then, I took the decision to leave Albert because another offer came along, and it was in such a holding pattern, not progressing through CASG, that it was like, okay, I need to move on and grow myself a bit more. But, I'll forever cherish that time at Albert because I was so well supported and given free rein to develop myself and deliver on the project.
Because you were still sort of in the defence sphere, when did you start to feel like a civvy? No, sorry, civvy is not the right word. We will never be civvies, as you heard me speak about the other day. But when did you feel comfortable in your own skin that you were not in uniform anymore and you weren't going to go back to being in uniform and this was the new you?
Yeah, that's a tough one. It was definitely some time while I was at Albert, and like us, we like to be early's on time is late is unacceptable.
Yep.
Working with engineers, like, hey, the meeting's at 10, they roll in at 10:03, 10:05, and I just have to sit there and be like, this is the way it is. I can't hold them to account. Yes, it's rude. Yes, it's unprofessional, but at the same time, that's how people operate. I can't get mad about it. So I definitely softened at some point, probably around 2019, I think.
Yeah. Yep. And what was the trigger for you to migrate away from Albert then? Tell us about that, because now we're going to talk about, ladies and gents, that a lot of people join them. Like, how many years all up did you end up doing in the military full time?
It was just about 11 years full time, and then had 2 years reserves after that.
Great. And then you had 3 jobs since then? Three roles?
Yeah, so Veterans Branch, Albert, the last one that I've just did 2.5 months in, and now I'm about to take up a new job on Monday.
Yeah, right. So there's going to be a bit of employment churn or changeover. So you do 11 years straight from being a younger gentleman when we first met, going through your maturity, excelling as a military officer, getting out, experiencing what it's like to be a veteran at first, and then go through a number of sort of job changes. What was your trigger to leave Albert and then sort of go and try something different? Because now and then what was that role, and did it have a defence linkage? And certainly, let's sort of start to wrap up, Josh. What are you doing now, and what linkages does that or not have with defence?
Yeah, so the trigger was because Land 200 was on hold, essentially. Army put out a seesaw, said remove BMS, and then it's gone through the public domain a number of times on what's holding it up, whether it's true or not. And I got approached by another company saying, hey, would you be interested in this role? So I'm not actively looking, but why not? And that's one thing I did in defence, and I encourage everyone to do, is never turn away an opportunity on face value. It's always worth having a conversation. You don't have to commit to anything, but just explore your options, especially early.
Yeah.
And looking at the opportunity that came, I said, okay, I'll have a chat, explore it a bit more. And I said, this looks like a really good opportunity for growth in a business development / sales type role. And I spoke to my boss, Forbo, and said, look, this is the opportunity that's come up. I've been open with them in that I will give you the opportunity to counteroffer or retain me. And he said, look, where we're at. We cannot counteroffer. We're going to have, it's a great opportunity for you. If you want to grow and develop, I fully support you. There's no hard feelings because you've done the righty and you've come and spoken to us. So I took that opportunity, and it was a good one, but it just wasn't for me. Doing business development and sales just didn't gel with me. I felt uncomfortable doing it.
I was going to say, what part of it felt uncomfortable? As he takes a swig of his water bottle, ladies and gents.
Good timing.
That's all right.
I think it largely like following up and just also working on the intangible. So you're prospecting, you're like, hey, we can do this, or we can sell you that, or we can support this project, without something like at JB Hi-Fi. When you do sales there, people are walking in knowing they want a television. And you're like, well, we have all these range of televisions. I think what you want is this one. This was more like going to meet other defense primes like Rheinmetall, Hanwha, BAE, Boeing, and talking to them about opportunities, and then putting forward proposals to them or to defence and saying, hey, here's a quote for something. Here's a proposal for something.
Oh, I hate those things. Quotes and proposals, mate. It's like the worst ever thing. Even you're like rolling your eyes going, fuck.
And I can do it, and engaging in that sphere when you're talking to people in defence industry or in defence that are ex-defence or veterans, it was very comfortable. And that was the feedback I was getting. It's like, you're in your element. But I just, emailing and following up and like, oh, I'm going to send you a quote for this unsolicited. It just wasn't me.
Yeah. We've had some amazing training here at Axon about how to handle, as you know, we send people across a success package agreement, but it's not a quote. It's not a tender. It's not a proposal. It's a no-brainer. It solves the issues you have, and people look at it and go, I'm happy to now pay that money to take care of all those problems for me.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
We never used to do it back in the day, so we've gone through our own evolution of what the natural process is to allow the exchange of value to occur when people want to use our services. So, when we get to that point, and certainly, mate, I'm happy to sort of do a separate session with you, because down the track, like at the end of the day, every business provides a service to other people, and that service includes an exchange of value.
Absolutely.
We've got it nailed down. By the time we get to a point where someone is asking to be sent their success package and they're being accepted into our long-term coaching program, they're not still considering it. We've already taken care of all that. It's like, I want to get started now. How can I get this happening? And I'd love you to have that training under your belt as well.
Yeah, and it's like anything else in broader life. You have a personal trainer, an accountant, a lawyer, you pay someone for their expertise. And I was talking to someone about this the other day where she's trying to manage her own build. I'm like, doesn't the builder do that? Don't you have a support team? And I explained the Axon, and she's just looking at me going, you have a build support team that manages all that shit for you. I'm like, yeah I pay them money because that's what it's worth. Like, to have hands off, they know what they're doing. Why wouldn't you do that? It makes total sense.
It's all right, mate. But people don't know what they don't know, mate. So yeah.
No, and that's it.
So tell me, so that the last job you're in was only for a few months. There's a little bit of churn there. Like, it takes a couple of months to sort of truly get your feet under the desk and know what you're doing anyway. And then you obviously had that realization, like, all right, I don't want to do this anymore. So tell me what's next, mate.
So an opportunity again came my way. I wasn't actively applying for an operations manager role at KBR, who largely puts support packages into defence. So the last sort of operations role I did was at Forces Command, day-to-day running, reporting, staying across, are people hitting their KPIs? Are they achieving tasks? That's much more my jam. And because I feel, at least not having started yet, we're supporting into defence, that's again valuable to me. I'm contributing somewhere. Sure, it's a for-profit business, but at the same time, making sure we're actually delivering outcomes for defence.
Exactly.
So that's I'm excited.
There's nothing wrong with being a for-profit business. Life can't run on love, trust, and pixie dust forever. There needs to be an exchange of value. People pay us 10 grand for us to do everything for them, and we're now getting people buying their second, third properties with us that have made $200,000 since then. Would you fucking spend 10 to get 200? You don't even have to answer that, right? So it's a no-brainer.
No, exactly. So that's where I'm at now, and I've learned a lot along the way. And we talked about a bunch of stuff where I went through some things like that semi-trailer, and we've spoken at length about my issues and how that went, and then you've sort of opened up about some things in your life.
I got plenty to go. I'm just teasing people at the moment about the stories I've got to pass on. I've got shit tins more. So watch this space, ladies and gents. Even Daniel behind the camera, he's like, I'm looking forward to hearing that stuff.
Yeah, as am I, because you heard, a bunch of my stuff, and I tell people the same sort of high level thing, and how it went down, and the help I went to get afterwards, and how it just highlighted for me how broken some of the systems in defence are, and what they do to people leaving is just not fair. So people get out and they're not prepared for the transition. They're not prepared for what they're going to face. And then they're stuck adjusting, and everyone gets uncomfortable adjusting to a new environment or whatever. That's normal, but it's also recognizing those signs and just saying, hey, I'm having a reaction here. Why am I having this reaction? What's causing it? What do I need to do about it?
Yeah. And it's always going to happen, mate, like the little bit of employment churn that you've got, going on right now. I say to people, and I'll be a bit arrogant here, for those that have the privilege of wearing an Axon shirt, you've got a job for life. But I'm also realistic to say that not necessarily everyone's going to want to stay for life. And like, who the fuck am I to like close the gates and say, no, you must not leave? Like it's a complete free commodity as far as that goes. And people are going to come and go. And, you know, there's been a couple of revolving doors here at Axon, and it's probably going to continue in the future because everyone has changing stuff in their life. Everyone has different priorities going on in their life, and it's completely natural. But, you know, it's one out, one in sort of thing. And, you know, the show goes on for those businesses that you're not working with anymore. And when this new role that you're about to take up, if that's not a lifelong project for you, when you choose to depart, the show will go on there as well. That's life, mate.
It's the same in Army. You know, we post, we change roles, we move locations, and I had the posting order to go to Adelaide to be an OC at 1 Armoured, and I decided that no, as much as I want to do that job, I don't want to continue to relocate to go out bush. And then, you know, that conveyor belt, which you touched on earlier, where if you're following that conveyor belt where you go course, you promote, you do this, if you jump off that conveyor belt, you can't then get back on it.
That's the treadmill that Joe was talking about a couple of days ago.
Yeah, that mental treadmill that doesn't slow down. Yeah. Because the city said, what happens if you just keep running? I'm like, you break, you fall on your face, and you hit that treadmill and you get ejected out the back.
Myself and that other guy, Dan, we sat there, we're like,
yeah, I heard that.
I don't know. It was like a question I hadn't even posed before. I'm like, fuck. First of all, I'm like, what am I doing in a padded room?
If you've gotten to that point, yeah. Well, the padded room could be defense. It's a good analogy, you know. Imagine what you will.
Mate,
it's not white, it's green.
It probably was, you know. I was like in the movies padded, so I'm like, what have I done to wind up in here, and why is there a treadmill in here?
I'd probably just ask Tam, you know. Yeah,
funny stuff. Mate, I'll go back to one of my opening comments, buddy, as we sort of finish up here, that I've loved watching your journey. I loved we remain humbled and honoured to be on your team from a property and wealth creation perspective. I love the courage you've shown to be able to get out of the military, try a few different roles. You know, you're in the process now of trying something different. Mm-hmm. I got out of the military. I've only ever had 2 jobs. One when I joined Defence as a 17-year-old, and one working with the other property investment firm that I got out afterwards. And now I don't have a job; I have a business. And I choose to work in the business, and this is not me being at work. This is me being my best self. I can't actually imagine what it's like to have to resign from a job, write a resume, apply for jobs, go to an interview. Like as I've said plenty of times before, who the fuck's going to hire me? I wouldn't want to hire me, but that's okay. That's between me and my mirror. So, mate, you're an inspiration to me. You should be an inspiration to many other people listening, no doubt. And this crazy thing called life that we're all living, mate, it throws a couple of curveballs at you every now and then, but it's the way that we react. It's, you know, that's going to be the real test of who we are and what we're going to do next.
Well, that's it. And that's a great point that, you know, writing resumes, resigning from jobs, it's exhausting, but it's part of life. It's like looking for a property. You know, if you don't have to burn yourself out, don't. Because I've done that where I went house hunting and was desperate to find somewhere to live, and then to have this process where it's like, this is the property, this is the thing. Cool. That's one less decision I have to make, less mental fatigue. You know, having to have that conversation about, hey, I'm going to resign and here's why, is like a breakup. You know, it's exhausting.
Yeah.
And then I think one piece of advice I'd want to give to people is if you are finding yourself burnt out in whatever you are doing, recognize it and deal with it. Don't wait. You know, totally. I had to have a nap yesterday. I was cooked after the long conversations and exit interviews. It was exhausting mentally and emotionally. So, you know, I think people need to recognize that.
Mate, it is. And it's a bit of self-help as well. Like we've had someone depart from us recently, like last week. And when she jumped on the call and said, hey, look, I want to speak to you, and tomorrow I've got a few things going on. It wasn't a reach out for help. It wasn't like, hey, I'm struggling here. It wasn't like, can we talk about a few things? It's like, I'm out. We're like, what?
Yeah.
like the feeling of helplessness that we have when someone puts their hand up and says, I'm out, without giving any indication that they're struggling in the first place, as a business owner, is fucking terrible, quite frankly. Yeah. So it's almost like I'm now, based on that experience alone, I'm like now eyes and ears wide open, far more than what I was before. Even though we've got management systems in place, and I've sat with the middle managers here in the business, I'm like, when people say that they're going okay, fucking ask them again. You know what I mean? And not actually, and ask that hard question. who was it last night? When I was watching the Warney tribute last night, someone was talking about, they're like, you know, how you going, mate? Yeah, I'm good. And he'd like look you in the eye and go, you're not good. What the fuck's going on? And it's almost like we all in the name of looking after each other, are you okay day, et cetera, you know, it's a self-help failure for that person because they haven't had the courage or circumstances around where they can feel comfortable to say, you know, something to someone. But it's also our job as leaders to go, no, I'm going to look into your soul. Don't just give me the facade of like, yeah, mate, it's all good. Because it's fucking, it's, you know, quite often not, which is really sad, mate.
It is. And we're conditioned to just that response of like, hey, going, yeah, all right. All good. I heard it a long time ago where someone's like, don't ask what they're doing. Ask them, are they happy? And I tried it on you one point just to go, all right, I'm going to try that. And it's like, are you happy? Mate, I'm loving it. And then off you went on the Robbie rant, which was great, to go, okay, I've asked the right question because I'm getting a genuine response, which, you know, from you, there's never a non-genuine response. But to try that on other people and just go, how you going? Okay. All right. So are you happy with what you're doing? Is everything all right? And people are, well, actually, like, here we go. Okay. And you need to be prepared to listen.
Yeah, totally, mate. Totally. Oh, mate, I could sit here for another bloody 2 hours and jaw off of you about this stuff. Thank you so much for coming on Axons Unleashed. It's I'm glad we had a chat from a semi-professional perspective for 10 minutes and then, you know, jawed off as mates a couple of weeks ago. I'm so glad I invited you to come along here and thank you for accepting. You have contributed to the Axon community and like who it is and what we're all about so much, buddy. So, yeah, thank you so much.
No, my pleasure. Thank you for having me on, and I look forward to eventually getting up to the office and meeting the team in person rather than virtually.
We're here, brother.
You know, thanks for what you do as well. You know, third property's underway, so I'm stoked as well.
Absolutely you are. All right, Josh, have a great day, buddy. Catch up soon.
Cheers.
See ya.
Thanks, RT.